Hello everyone, and welcome to the Retro Future. My name is Elliot, and today I'm going to be telling you the tale of the time that I thought I became a millionaire buying a Game Boy. This one right here, to be exact. Now, I buy lots of Game Boys. If you're not familiar with my channel, it's basically all I do. And in fact, on one particular website called Sendico, where I got this thing from, I've done that around about 500 times. I search for Game Boy, I have a little scroll around, and sometimes something catches my eye that I go, I can make a video on that. And I do that with my glasses too. Now, once I make the video, I decide whether I'm going to keep it, give it to a friend, or sell it. And if I keep it, it will go out on display and sit on a shelf and possibly even collect dust, but it makes me very happy. Didn't make my ex-girlfriends very happy, but I'm single now, so what does that say? Why did I suspect that this might have been a £1 million Game Boy? Well, we're going to find out that answer after we roll the intro. Before we get into it, a massive thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. A VPN is a program that redirects your data that comes in and out of your devices from the internet. Thanks to their data encryption feature, NordVPN is a safe and reliable way to protect your private information, and it blocks malware and more, especially when using public Wi-Fi. With NordVPN, you can connect safely to different servers from all over the world. With either its easy-to-use one-click connect or just enable auto-connect for zero-click protection. I've used NordVPN for a while now, and I couldn't recommend it enough. To find out more, visit nordvpn.com/TRF and use code TRF. It's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Without any further ado, let's get into the video. Enough waffle, let's get into this thing, and I'll show you exactly why I thought this was going to make me a mint. Okay, so maybe $1 million is a little bit of an exaggeration, but you just never know when it comes to artwork. Now, you're probably looking at this thinking, how is this guy so delusional into thinking that a vandalized Game Boy is going to be worth any amount of money? Now, I can see why you'd think that, if you didn't know who Keith Haring was. Who's Keith Haring? Are you mad? You haven't heard of Keith Haring? Let me show you who Keith Haring is. Whatever you do, the only secret is to believe in it and satisfy yourself. Don't do it for anyone else. That quote couldn't mean more to me as a YouTuber of 6 years, attempting to bring my audience new content every month. Keith Haring's seemingly surface-level childish doodles reached deep into the hearts of the people. Keith Haring was a street artist who was most prominent during the 1980s, but to this day remains hugely relevant, influential, and inspiring. Born in 1958, Haring lived a very short but incredible life, and passed away due to AIDS-related complications on the 16th of February 1990. He was just 31.
Keith Haring, the best-known and best-loved pop artist of the 1980s, died in his sleep early Friday morning at his home in New York of AIDS-related complications.
His artwork quickly emerged from the subway where he had really begun to find his feet, to exhibits, huge murals, and museums all over the world, eventually becoming close friends with the likes of Basquiat and Andy Warhol. While some pretentious art connoisseurs doubted the power, intellect, and overall depth to his work, he just cracked on, line by line, making the world smile, claiming that the best reason to paint is that there is no reason to paint. And nothing is important, so everything is important. Mantras to live by as an artist, giving perspective on why we do what we do.
Once I started to realize that exactly how I was communicating, I started to be much more aware of what I was communicating. And not so much just putting out abstract thoughts, but really trying to guide people to see particular things and starting to deal with more social concerns.
Looking deeper into his work, you quickly discover that behind the simplicity, Haring tackles some very poignant topics, such as birth, death, sex, war, and love. You might have noticed the Game Boy featured the words "Stop AIDS." AIDS was a huge focus in Haring's later work. As a member of the gay community during the height of the AIDS crisis, his close friends started catching the illness, and he knew that his time was short. His work then geared towards raising awareness and promoting safe sex, all while staying true to his simple, accessible style. Keith Haring is still very much appreciated today, and his artwork is still being printed onto clothes, accessories, and merchandise around the world. As well as that, some of his pieces have sold for several millions of dollars. Now, this Game Boy was never going to be worth that, but it is a very unique piece. Being that he was often out in public painting murals on the streets, plenty of his work made its way onto disposable objects and things which people had on their person. Such objects are considered extremely valuable and sell for tens of thousands. So let's look at this one. So this thing is covered in doodles. Arguably, it wouldn't be too difficult to recreate his work due to the simplistic style, but even with that considered, I had a go, and it turned out shit. Yeah! Side by side with work that is known to be his, you can see just how accurate it looks. Not to mention that the words "Stop AIDS" are written in a handwriting style remarkably similar to words that we know he's written. Yes, this all doesn't mean it's certain to be his work, but the detail is not something to be brushed over. Look, for example, how the designs wrap around, and this little one even jumps over the gap in the shell. A few interesting things to note are that the writing on the Game Boy itself has been scratched off. This would go against a possible theory that someone bumped into Keith Haring on the street, whipped out their Game Boy, and asked him to just sign it. There's way more work involved than just that. As well as that, all of these lines on the back would have been quite time-consuming stuff. Now, although the word "Stop AIDS" is written in English, it does look like there was some Japanese text on it too, which has been rubbed off. And I don't know if Keith Haring wrote Japanese. As well as that, there is wear around the buttons, which does actually show that this thing has some age to it. Not to mention the fact that the battery terminals are covered in corrosion, so the Game Boy doesn't even turn on. Now, one thing that we simply can't brush over is the fact that I bought this from a Japanese auction site. According to Google Arts and Culture, Haring did visit Japan, but apparently only in 1983 and 1988, which wouldn't align with the release date of the Game Boy. That doesn't mean to say that a Japanese businessman didn't travel to New York and bump into him, but as I mentioned earlier, it seems unlikely he would do all of this just there and then. Now, unfortunately, the potential nail in the coffin lies within the Game Boy itself. Taking the back off allows us to look deeper into the history of this specific Game Boy. There are markings on the CPU on the motherboard which actually confirm the specific date that that CPU was made. And in this case, it was April of 1991, as indicated by the 9104 on the CPU, which is a whole year later after Haring passed away. That of course doesn't mean to say that someone hasn't swapped out the motherboard, but again, that's quite unlikely given the corrosion in the battery terminals. And so thus concludes the video on the Keith Haring Game Boy. Is it his? Is it not? It's unlikely. Given that he passed away the year after this thing was released, it's pretty unlikely. And given that the chip was manufactured after he passed away, although that doesn't rule out completely that it was done by him, it is, I guess, unlikely that someone's going to replace the motherboard, although that is something that I've done a million times. Is someone going to have done that? And what about the corrosion? Speaking of which, getting this thing to work shouldn't be too difficult. I've taken out the old battery terminals. You can see just how bad they were. Absolutely covered in corrosion. But if we pop some new ones in, like that. There we go. It turns on and there's not a single line missing on the screen. Happy days. One final thing to say on this is that it only cost me £13, and I absolutely love Keith Haring, and there is no denying that this is going to make an absolutely beautiful addition to my collection. Whether it's done by him or not, that is absolutely something I'm going to display proudly on my shelf. I'm not lying when I said I'm a bit of a Keith Haring fanboy, although these are absolutely gross. These are limited edition Keith Haring Reebok classics. I've also got a tea coaster that my friend made me, and also these socks that my friend Yaz bought me with Keith Haring designs all over. And I've got a Keith Haring tattoo. I mean, that says it all. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I have loved making this video, as you can probably tell. It's something that I just had so much fun doing. And if you did enjoy it, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. Just consider it. Just consider it. Okay, just do it.